Hello, I'm Natalie Billingham, EMEA Managing Director and SVP of Sales here at Akamai, and I'd like to welcome you all to this edition of You're on Mute. Today, I'd like to introduce Gordon-Tveito Duncan. Gordon is the co-founder and head at Gaia Lens. This is a fintech group that provides data-driven, transparent, and real-time analytics for ESG for institutional investors. Gordon's an experienced financial analyst, having worked in an investment bank in the technology sector as a research analyst, as well as receiving a distinction for his MSc in data science from City University of London, building on his economics degree from Warwick University. In the wake of the pandemic, the role that organizations are playing in society and their level of social responsibility is being scrutinized more than ever. As a result, environmental, social, and governance has emerged as a critical business strategy and a risk protection factor. In addition, in a time of unpredictable turnover and intense competition for talent, the relationship between ESG and the workforce has become a key lever for engaging employees and in the attraction and retention of talent. That's why today, Gordon and I want to look at ESG as a workforce strategy and how organizations can respond to the evolving expectations through actionable change. So welcome, Gordon. How is ESG starting to shape business strategy and employee engagement?
Well, ESG has gone far beyond the financial world nowadays, and every major corporation really has to have some sort of ESG strategy. And since there is much more focus on companies' ESG performance and companies are reporting more on ESG metrics, this is definitely having an effect on employee engagement. So employees are now more able than ever to hold their employers to account on ESG issues such as climate change and social injustice. And we've seen this happening more and more over recent years, particularly with some of the big tech firms as well.
And, that's so true. We've certainly seen that across the news. And so then how can the organizations respond to evolving stakeholder expectations around ESG? And then how can they garner support?
Sure. So ESG is a very dynamic space and is constantly evolving. So I think that's really important for organizations to listen to all of their stakeholders. So one such stakeholder is a company's investors. And so it's very important for an organization to understand what they're focusing on, what metrics they're assessing a company on, for example, carbon emissions or board diversity. And of course, another important stakeholder is a company's employees. They may have very different aims and interests. And again, I think it's important for a company to listen to those from an employee perspective and not sort of create ESG policy within a vacuum. And I guess simple things that we've seen companies do is just carry out surveys and figure out what employees care about. And this, again, because it's ESG is very broad. And again, that may change, employees' priorities may change from department to department, from region to region. And so really you need to listen to employees and get their feedback.
And I know it's such a vast topic, but based on the data that you're seeing, what should businesses be focusing on with regards to ESG?
Yeah, this is a big question, and it will depend on what industry a company often operates in. But I think what's really important is in the ESG world is this concept of double materiality. It's where companies not only focus on how external risks are affecting them, so for example, climate change, but also how they're impacting the environment and society, which is actually maybe more the angle that employees care about. How is their organization that they're part of affecting the world? And traditionally, just looking at assessing financial performance, often analysts have just been focusing on the risks to a company and how to mitigate them. But now, of course, with so many important issues taking place in the world, like the climate change crisis, it's very important for companies to think about how they're impacting the world.
That is such a fascinating concept of double materiality, and there's a lot in there to think about. But I suppose thinking about the employee retention angle, how can a focus on ESG be used to improve employee retention? And then, what insights or tips might you have for managers around that?
Sure. So employee retention is one of the key metrics that we look at when it comes to companies, and is one of the inputs to our overall ESG scores. And we've seen that, as I guess you would expect, employee satisfaction has a very strong correlation with employee retention. And digging down into what drives employee satisfaction, we've seen that things like company culture, a company's diversity and inclusion, this is all from the employee perspective, and also employees' review of senior management are all very strongly correlated with employee satisfaction. And so these are things that management or managers should think about and be aware of.
Really, really useful areas there, actually, Gordon, because I think for leaders and for managers to have that conscious reflection around what is the culture that we're creating, is it diverse, is it inclusive, and that will ultimately help, retain the team, is such a worthwhile reminder for us all. So thank you so much for all of those insights, Gordon. Really appreciate you joining us today, and thanks to everyone who's listened to this edition of You're on Mute. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard or what you've watched, then please do feel free to like or share. Thanks all.